The morning sun filtered through the hospital corridor windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor as William sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair outside the oncology ward. His hands trembled slightly as he held the lukewarm coffee that had long since lost its appeal. 3 months had passed since Catherine received her diagnosis, and every day felt like walking through a minefield of hope and despair. William remembered the exact moment their world changed forever. It was a Tuesday evening in September when Catherine came home from her routine checkup, her face pale and her usual bright smile replaced by a look of confusion and fear. She had found the lump during a self-examination 2 weeks prior, but both of them had convinced themselves it was nothing serious. Catherine was only 34, healthy, active, and had no family history of cancer. The word itself seemed foreign when the doctor first spoke it in his sterile office. The diagnosis hit them like a freight train moving at full speed. Invasive ductal carcinoma, stage 2, aggressive but treatable. William felt the ground shift beneath his feet as the oncologist explained treatment options, survival rates, and the long road ahead. Catherine sat frozen beside him, her hand gripping his so tightly that his fingers went numb, but he never pulled away. In that moment, he made a silent promise to himself and to her that he would be her anchor through whatever storm was coming. The weeks that followed the diagnosis were a blur of medical appointments, second opinions, and sleepless nights spent researching treatment options online. William took leave from his job at the architectural firm where he had worked for 8 years. His boss, Marcus, was understanding and supportive, telling William that his position would be waiting for him whenever he was ready to return. The financial pressure was mounting, but William knew that being present for Catherine was more important than any paycheck. Catherine chose to be proactive about her treatment. After consulting with 3 different oncologists, they decided on a comprehensive approach that would include surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. The lumpectomy was scheduled for early October, and William spent the night before the surgery lying awake, listening to Catherine's steady breathing and wondering how their lives had taken such a dramatic turn in such a short time. The surgery went well, but the pathology results brought mixed news. The surgeon had successfully removed the tumor with clear margins, but the lymph nodes showed signs that cancer cells had spread. This meant that chemotherapy would be more aggressive than initially planned. William watched Catherine absorb this information with a strength that amazed him. She asked detailed questions about side effects, success rates, and timelines. Her pragmatic approach to the situation helped him find his own footing in the chaos of uncertainty. Their first meeting with the chemotherapy team was overwhelming. Nurse Patricia, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands, explained the process in detail. Catherine would receive treatments every 3 weeks for 6 months. The drugs would be powerful, and the side effects would be significant. Hair loss, nausea, fatigue, and compromised immune system were all certainties. Nurse Patricia also warned them about the emotional toll that chemotherapy could take on both patients and their families. William threw himself into the role of caregiver with the same intensity he had once reserved for designing buildings. He researched nutrition for cancer patients, learned about managing side effects, and transformed their spare bedroom into a comfortable recovery space. He bought soft blankets, installed blackout curtains for when Catherine needed to rest during the day, and set up a small refrigerator stocked with ice chips and ginger ale for nausea management. The night before Catherine's first chemotherapy session, they sat together on their living room couch, neither of them speaking for long stretches of time. Catherine had decided to cut her hair short before it started falling out from treatment. The long auburn curls that William loved to run his fingers through now lay on the salon floor, replaced by a pixie cut that made her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. She caught him staring and smiled sadly. "I know it looks different," she said, running her hand through the short strands. "You're beautiful," William replied, and he meant it. "You've always been beautiful, and losing your hair won't change that." Catherine leaned against his shoulder, and he could feel the tension in her body. "I'm scared, Will. I know I've been putting on a brave face, but I'm terrified of what's coming." William wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But we're going to get through this together. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The first chemotherapy session was a surreal experience. The infusion center was bustling with activity. patients of all ages sitting in reclining chairs with 4 lines running into their arms. Some read books, others slept, and a few chatted quietly with family members. William was struck by the sense of community among the patients and their caregivers. Everyone understood what the others were going through without needing to explain. Catherine's treatment took 4 hours. William sat beside her chair, holding her hand and trying to distract her with stories about funny incidents at work or memories from their dating days. Nurse Patricia checked on them regularly, adjusting Catherine's medication and ensuring she was comfortable. The anti-nausea medication made Catherine drowsy, and she dozed off periodically with her head resting against William's shoulder. When they arrived home that evening, Catherine felt relatively normal. The pre-medications had done their job of preventing immediate side effects. They ordered takeout from their favorite Italian restaurant and watched a romantic comedy on the couch. For a few hours, it felt almost like a normal evening, and William allowed himself to hope that maybe the treatment wouldn't be as difficult as they had been warned. The reprieve was short-lived. Catherine woke up the next morning feeling nauseous and exhausted. Over the following days, the side effects intensified. She could barely keep food down, and even the smell of coffee, which she had always loved, made her sick. William learned to cook bland foods that might be easier on her stomach and to recognize the signs that she needed to rest. By day 5 after her first treatment, Catherine's hair began falling out in clumps. William found strands on her pillow when he made the bed, and Catherine discovered handfuls coming loose when she ran her fingers through what remained. That evening, she asked William to help her shave off the rest. They stood together in their bathroom, William carefully running the electric razor over her scalp while Catherine watched in the mirror with tears streaming down her face. "I feel like I'm losing myself," Catherine whispered as the last of her hair fell away. William set down the razor and placed his hands gently on her shoulders, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "You're not losing yourself. You're fighting for yourself. This is temporary, Catherine. Your hair will grow back, but you're going to beat this cancer." They bought several comfortable scarves and a few wigs, though Catherine preferred the scarves for daily wear. The wigs felt too artificial, she said, and the scarves allowed her scalp to breathe. William learned to tie them in different styles, becoming surprisingly skilled at creating looks that made Catherine feel confident when they needed to go out for appointments or errands. The second chemotherapy session was harder than the first. Catherine's body was still recovering from the initial treatment when it was time for the next round. Her white blood cell count was low, which meant her immune system was compromised. They had to be careful about exposure to crowds or people who might be sick. Simple activities like grocery shopping became complicated logistics operations. William watched Catherine's energy levels fluctuate dramatically from day to day. Some mornings she woke up feeling relatively strong and wanted to take short walks around their neighborhood. Other days, she could barely get out of bed. The unpredictability was almost harder to deal with than consistent symptoms would have been. They learned to take each day as it came and not make firm plans that might need to be cancelled. 3 weeks into the chemotherapy regimen, Catherine developed neuropathy in her hands and feet. The nerve damage caused tingling, numbness, and sometimes sharp pains that made it difficult for her to perform simple tasks like buttoning her clothes or holding a pen. William took over many of the household responsibilities that required fine motor skills. He learned to braid friendship bracelets when Catherine could no longer manage her crafting hobby, and he practiced applying nail polish when she wanted to maintain some sense of normalcy in her appearance. The emotional challenges proved to be just as difficult as the physical ones. Catherine went through periods of anger, sadness, and frustration that were completely understandable but hard for both of them to navigate. Some days she snapped at William over minor things, then immediately apologized with tears in her eyes. Other days she withdrew completely, spending hours staring out the window without speaking. William struggled with his own emotional responses to Catherine's suffering. He felt helpless watching the woman he loved endure such difficult treatment. There were moments when he stepped outside onto their back porch and allowed himself to cry quietly where Catherine couldn't see him. He didn't want to add to her burden by expressing his own fears and frustrations. Their relationship had to evolve in ways neither of them had anticipated. Physical intimacy became complicated by Catherine's fluctuating energy levels and the side effects of treatment. they learned to find new ways to connect and maintain closeness. Sometimes it was as simple as William reading aloud to Catherine when she was too tired to focus on a book herself. Other times they would lie together in bed, not talking, just taking comfort in each other's presence. Friends and family rallied around them in ways that were both helpful and, sometimes, overwhelming. Catherine's sister Emma flew in from Seattle to help during the second month of treatment. She organized a meal delivery schedule so that William didn't have to worry about cooking every day. The gesture was thoughtful, but it also meant a constant stream of visitors dropping off food, and Catherine often felt obligated to entertain people when she barely had energy for basic daily activities. William learned to be protective of Catherine's time and energy. He became skilled at graciously accepting help while also setting boundaries about visiting hours and duration. Some friends understood immediately that brief, no-pressure visits were most helpful. Others seemed to treat Catherine's illness as an opportunity for dramatic displays of support that were more about their own need to feel useful than about what Catherine actually needed. The halfway point of chemotherapy felt like a significant milestone, but it also brought new challenges. Catherine's cumulative exposure to the drugs meant that side effects were becoming more severe and lasting longer between treatments. Her oncologist, Dr. Martinez, monitored her blood work carefully and occasionally delayed treatments when her white blood cell counts were too low or her liver function showed signs of stress. Each delay felt like a setback to Catherine, who wanted to power through the treatment as quickly as possible. She worried that any deviation from the planned schedule might compromise her chances of recovery. Dr. Martinez explained that these adjustments were normal and often necessary to ensure that her body could tolerate the full course of treatment without suffering permanent damage. William found himself becoming an expert on medical terminology and treatment protocols. He kept detailed records of Catherine's side effects, medications, and blood test results. The information helped him feel like he was actively contributing to her care rather than just watching helplessly from the sidelines. Dr. Martinez appreciated his involvement and often directed medical explanations to both of them as a team. As autumn turned to winter, Catherine's treatment regimen became a rhythm of difficult but predictable cycles. 3 weeks of gradual recovery followed by another chemotherapy session that knocked her down again. William learned to recognize the patterns of her energy levels and plan their days accordingly. He scheduled appointments for her better days and kept the schedule clear during the week following each treatment. The holiday season presented unique challenges. Catherine wanted to maintain some family traditions, but her energy levels and compromised immune system made large gatherings impossible. They hosted a small Christmas dinner with just immediate family members, and Catherine insisted on cooking one of her traditional dishes despite feeling weak. William stayed close by, ready to step in if she needed help, but understanding her need to feel capable and useful. On New Year's Eve, as they sat together watching fireworks on television, Catherine reflected on the year that had changed everything for them. "I never imagined this is where we'd be," she said quietly. "A year ago, we were making plans to renovate the kitchen and talking about maybe starting a family soon." William took her hand, careful not to press too hard on her fingers, which were still sensitive from neuropathy. "Those plans are just postponed, not cancelled," he said. "We'll get through this treatment, and then, we'll figure out what comes next." Catherine squeezed his hand as much as she was able. "I don't know what I would do without you, Will. I know this hasn't been easy for you either." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," William replied, and he meant it completely. "We promised in sickness and in health, remember? This is just the sickness part. We're going to get to the health part soon." As January began, they were approaching the final months of Catherine's chemotherapy treatment. The end felt tantalizingly close but still far away. William had learned not to look too far ahead, focusing instead on getting through each day and each treatment session. The uncertainty about Catherine's long-term prognosis remained a constant undercurrent in their lives, but they had both learned to find moments of joy and normalcy even in the midst of such a difficult period. The experience had changed them both in profound ways. William discovered reserves of strength and patience he didn't know he possessed. Catherine found that she could endure far more than she had ever imagined possible. Their relationship had been tested in ways they never expected when they exchanged vows 3 years earlier, but it had also deepened in ways that felt permanent and meaningful. The road ahead was still uncertain, but they had learned to navigate uncertainty together. Whatever news the next phase of treatment would bring, they would face it as they had faced everything else over the past months, with love, determination, and an unshakable commitment to each other. The fluorescent lights in Dr. Martinez's office hummed softly as William and Catherine sat across from the oncologist's desk, waiting for the results of Catherine's latest scans. It was February, and they were 3/4 of the way through her chemotherapy regimen. The past month had been particularly challenging, with Catherine experiencing more severe fatigue and digestive issues that made it difficult for her to maintain proper nutrition. Dr. Martinez entered the room with a thick folder and an expression that William had learned to read over the months of treatment. It wasn't the immediately reassuring smile that meant good news, but it wasn't the carefully neutral face that preceded difficult conversations either. William felt his heart rate increase as the doctor settled into his chair and opened Catherine's file. "I have your scan results from last week," Dr. Martinez began, his voice calm and measured. "Overall, we're seeing positive response to the treatment. The original tumor site continues to show no signs of recurrence, and we're not detecting any new areas of concern." Catherine exhaled slowly, and William felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. But he could sense there was more information coming. "However," the doctor continued, "we are seeing some concerning changes in your liver function tests. The chemotherapy drugs can be hard on the liver, and your levels have been climbing over the past 2 treatments. We need to discuss modifying your remaining treatment plan." The word, however, hung in the air like a weight. William reached for Catherine's hand, finding it cold and slightly trembling. They had both learned that good news in cancer treatment often came with complications that required difficult decisions. Dr. Martinez explained that Catherine's liver was showing signs of stress from the chemotherapy drugs. While this was not uncommon, it meant they needed to either reduce the dosage of her remaining treatments or potentially stop chemotherapy early. Both options carried risks and benefits that they would need to carefully consider. "What happens if we stop treatment now?" Catherine asked, her voice steady despite the fear William could see in her eyes. "You've completed 5 of your planned 6 cycles," Dr. Martinez replied. "Studies show that the majority of the treatment benefit comes from the first several cycles. Stopping after 5 instead of 6 would still give you an excellent chance of long-term remission, though it does slightly increase the risk of recurrence." William listened carefully as the doctor outlined the statistics and risk factors. Catherine had always been someone who made decisions based on data and logic, and he could see her processing the information methodically. But he also knew that beneath her analytical approach, she was struggling with the fear that cutting treatment short might compromise her recovery. "What about reducing the dosage instead of stopping?" William asked. "That's certainly an option," Dr. Martinez said. "We could reduce the dose by 25% for your final treatment. That would be easier on your liver but might also be less effective against any remaining cancer cells." Catherine was quiet for several minutes, staring at her hands folded in her lap. William could see the wheels turning as she weighed the options. This was the kind of decision she hated most, one where there was no clearly right answer, only trade-offs between different types of risk. "I need some time to think about this," Catherine finally said. "When do you need to know?" "You're scheduled for your next treatment in 10 days, Dr. Martinez replied. "We should make a decision by early next week so we can adjust the treatment protocol if needed." They left the appointment with more questions than answers. The drive home was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts about this unexpected complication. William wanted to offer advice or guidance, but he knew this was ultimately Catherine's decision to make about her own body and treatment. That evening, Catherine called her sister Emma to discuss the options. William listened from the kitchen as Catherine explained the situation, hearing the frustration and fear in her voice that she had been holding back during the doctor's appointment. Emma was a nurse practitioner, and Catherine valued her medical perspective as well as her emotional support. "What does your gut tell you?" Emma asked during their phone conversation. "I don't know," Catherine admitted. "Part of me wants to push through and complete the full treatment plan. But another part of me is so tired of feeling sick all the time. I just want my life back."
William understood that exhaustion completely. He was tired too, tired of watching Catherine suffer, tired of the constant medical appointments, tired of the uncertainty that had become their daily reality. But he also knew that Catherine needed to make this decision based on what felt right for her, not based on his own fatigue with the situation. Over the weekend, they researched liver toxicity from chemotherapy and spoke with 2 other oncologists to get additional opinions. Both doctors agreed that stopping after 5 cycles would still provide significant benefit, though they acknowledged that completing the full 6-cycle regimen would be optimal if Catherine's liver could tolerate it. Catherine spent Sunday afternoon sitting in their back garden, even though the February air was chilly. William brought her a warm blanket and sat beside her on the bench they had installed the previous spring. The garden was dormant for winter, but Catherine found peace in being outdoors and away from the medical atmosphere that had dominated their home for months. "I keep thinking about what comes after treatment," Catherine said, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Whether I do 5 cycles or 6, there's still going to be uncertainty about whether the cancer will come back. Maybe the difference between 5 and 6 treatments isn't as important as I'm making it." William nodded, understanding that Catherine was working through not just the immediate decision about treatment, but also the larger psychological challenge of learning to live with ongoing uncertainty about her health. "I think I want to do the reduced dose for the final treatment," Catherine continued. "It feels like a compromise between being aggressive about the cancer and protecting my liver for the long term." William felt relief at her decision, though he was careful not to express it too strongly. He wanted Catherine to feel confident that she was making the choice for her own reasons, not because of pressure from him or anyone else. Monday morning, they called Dr. Martinez's office to inform him of Catherine's decision. The nurse scheduled blood work for Wednesday to check Catherine's liver function before finalizing the modified treatment plan. If her levels had improved over the weekend, they would proceed with the reduced-dose chemotherapy. If they had continued to climb, they would need to reconsider stopping treatment entirely. The blood draw on Wednesday was routine by now, but the waiting for results still created anxiety. Catherine tried to distract herself by organizing the guest bedroom, which had become cluttered with medical supplies and equipment over the months of treatment. William helped her pack away items they no longer needed, and they both felt a small sense of progress in reclaiming their living space. Dr. Martinez called Thursday afternoon with good news. Catherine's liver function had stabilized and even improved slightly since the previous week. They could proceed with the modified final treatment as planned. Catherine's last chemotherapy session was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The night before her final treatment, Catherine asked William to help her remove the scarf she had been wearing to bed. She wanted to see how much of her hair had grown back during the treatment period. William gently unwrapped the soft fabric, revealing a thin layer of dark fuzz covering her scalp. It was shorter and a different texture than her original hair, but it was definitely growing. "It's coming back," Catherine said, running her palm over the short growth. "It's really coming back." William kissed the top of her head, feeling the soft new hair against his lips. "Just like I promised it would," he said. The final chemotherapy session felt surreal. They had been in the infusion center so many times that the staff felt like extended family. Nurse Patricia had been with them through every treatment, and she seemed almost as emotional as Catherine about reaching this milestone. "You've been such a strong patient," Patricia told Catherine as she started the foreline for the last time. "I've watched you handle this treatment with such grace and determination." Catherine smiled, though William could see tears forming in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without an amazing support system," she said, looking at William. "And without incredible medical care from all of you." The modified treatment took less time than the previous full-dose sessions, but it still required several hours for the infusion and monitoring. William brought a photo album of their travels together, and they spent the time looking through pictures from their trip to Ireland the year before Catherine's diagnosis. It felt good to remember their life before cancer and to imagine future trips they might take together. When the final medication drip was completed and the foreline was removed, Catherine sat quietly for several minutes. William could see that she was processing the significance of the moment, not just the end of active treatment, but also the beginning of a new phase of uncertainty about recovery and long-term prognosis. "How do you feel?" William asked as they gathered their belongings to leave. Empty, Catherine replied honestly. For months, I've been focused on getting through each treatment. Now I don't know what to focus on. William understood what she meant.
The structure of regular chemotherapy appointments had provided a framework for their lives, even though it was difficult. Without that framework, they would need to figure out how to move forward into an uncertain future.
Dr. Martinez scheduled Catherine for follow-up scans in 6 weeks, with regular monitoring appointments every 3 months for the next 2 years.
The transition from active treatment to surveillance felt abrupt, even though they had been preparing for it mentally. Catherine's recovery from the final chemotherapy session was similar to her previous experiences, several days of fatigue and nausea followed by gradual improvement. But, knowing it was the last time made the side effects feel more tolerable. Each difficult day was one step closer to feeling completely normal again.
2 weeks after finishing chemotherapy, Catherine had enough energy to take longer walks around their neighborhood.
The spring weather was beginning to emerge from winter, and she enjoyed being outside without the constant concern about her compromised immune system. Simple pleasures like stopping to pet a neighbor's dog or picking early daffodils from their garden felt like significant victories.
William had been considering returning to work part-time as Catherine's daily care needs diminished.
His supervisor Marcus had called several times to check on the family and to let William know that several projects were waiting for his input when he was ready. The financial pressure of taking extended unpaid leave was becoming significant, but William was reluctant to commit to a work schedule until he was confident about Catherine's stability. "I think you should go back to work," Catherine told him one morning as they shared coffee on their back porch. "I'm feeling stronger every day, and we need to start thinking about getting back to normal life." William appreciated Catherine's practical approach, but he was concerned about leaving her alone during the day so soon after treatment.
What if she had a medical emergency? What if the anxiety of being alone triggered the depression that sometimes accompanied cancer treatment?
They compromised on a gradual return to work schedule. William would go back 3 days a week initially, with the option to work from home if Catherine needed him. Marcus was accommodating about the flexible arrangement, understanding that William's family situation might continue to require adjustments. William's first day back at the office felt strange after months of focusing entirely on medical appointments and caregiving responsibilities. His colleagues were welcoming and respectful about not pressuring him to discuss the details of Catherine's treatment. The familiar routine of design work and client meetings provided a welcome mental break from the constant medical focus that had dominated their lives. However, William found it difficult to concentrate on architectural projects when his mind was still partly focused on Catherine's recovery. He called home twice during his first day back, and Catherine gently teased him about being overprotective when he arrived home that evening. "I managed to make myself lunch and take a nap without any medical emergencies," Catherine reported with a smile.
"I think I can handle being alone for a few hours."
As March progressed, both William and Catherine began to feel like they were slowly reclaiming their lives from cancer treatment. Catherine's energy continued to improve, and her hair was growing fast enough that she could occasionally go without a scarf when they were at home. The neuropathy in her hands and feet was gradually diminishing, allowing her to return to some of her crafting hobbies. They began making tentative plans for the future, nothing too ambitious, but small goals that helped them feel like they were moving forward rather than just surviving. Catherine wanted to plant a vegetable garden that spring, something they had talked about for years but never prioritized. William suggested they book a weekend getaway for later in the summer, their first real vacation since the diagnosis. The 6-week follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez was scheduled for early April. This would be Catherine's first major milestone scan since completing chemotherapy, and both of them felt nervous anticipation about the results. The scans would show whether the treatment had been successful in eliminating any remaining cancer cells and would help determine Catherine's long-term prognosis. In preparation for the appointment, Catherine had been keeping a journal of how she was feeling physically and emotionally. She wanted to give Dr. Martinez a comprehensive picture of her recovery progress. The journal entries showed steady improvement in most areas, with some lingering fatigue and occasional anxiety about cancer recurrence. William had also been preparing for the appointment, though in a different way. He had compiled questions about Catherine's ongoing care, follow-up schedules, and warning signs they should watch for that might indicate problems. His methodical approach to gathering information had served them well throughout treatment, and he wasn't ready to abandon that careful attention to medical details.
The night before the appointment, Catherine couldn't sleep.
William found her sitting in their living room at 2 a.m, staring out the window at their quiet street. "I'm scared of what the scans might show," Catherine admitted when William sat beside her.
"For months, I've been able to tell myself that I was actively fighting the cancer with treatment. Now I have to find out if it worked."
William wrapped his arm around her shoulders, feeling the slight weight she had lost during treatment and hadn't yet regained. "Whatever the scans show, we'll deal with it together," he said.
"Just like we've dealt with everything else."
Catherine leaned against him, and they sat together in comfortable silence until she felt ready to try sleeping again. William stayed awake long after Catherine's breathing became steady, thinking about how much their lives had changed over the past 7 months and wondering what the next phase of their journey would bring. The waiting room at the medical center felt different this time. April sunshine streamed through tall windows, casting warm light across the familiar space where William and Catherine had spent countless hours over the past 8 months. Today was the day they would receive the results of Catherine's first post-chemotherapy scans, and the atmosphere between them carried a tension that felt both hopeful and terrifying. Catherine sat beside William, her hands folded tightly in her lap, wearing a soft blue scarf that had become her favorite during treatment. Underneath, William could see the outline of new hair growth that was becoming thick enough to provide some coverage. She had gained back 5 pounds since finishing chemotherapy, and her complexion was beginning to lose the pale, translucent quality that had marked the worst days of treatment. Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway and gestured for them to follow him to his office. His expression was carefully neutral, giving no indication of what the scan results might reveal. William felt his chest tighten as they walked down the familiar hallway, passing the chemotherapy suite where Catherine had spent so many difficult days. Inside the office, Dr. Martinez pulled up Catherine's scans on his computer monitor and turned the screen so they could see the images. The black and white pictures meant little to William, but he watched Catherine's face carefully as the doctor began to explain what they were looking at. "Catherine, I'm very pleased with what these scans show," Dr. Martinez began, and William felt his breath catch.
"We see no evidence of active cancer in any of the areas we've been monitoring.
The original tumor site continues to show post-surgical changes but no signs of recurrence. Your lymph nodes appear normal, and we don't see any new areas of concern anywhere else in your body."
William watched Catherine's face transform as the words sank in.
Her eyes filled with tears, but, for the first time in months, they were tears of relief rather than fear. She reached for William's hand, and he could feel her trembling as the news hit her fully.
"Does this mean the cancer is gone?"
Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It means that we cannot detect any cancer cells with our current imaging technology," Dr. Martinez explained carefully.
"In medical terms, you are in complete remission.
This is exactly the result we were hoping to see after your treatment." William felt a wave of emotion wash over him that was so intense he had to concentrate on breathing steadily.
Complete remission.
The words he had been afraid to hope for, even in his most optimistic moments during the darkest days of treatment. He looked at Catherine, who was crying openly now, and felt his own tears start to fall. Dr. Martinez gave them a moment to absorb the news before continuing with the practical aspects of Catherine's ongoing care. She would need follow-up scans every 6 months for the next 2 years, then, annually after that. Regular blood work would monitor for any signs that cancer cells were returning. Most importantly, Catherine would need to be vigilant about reporting any new symptoms or concerns immediately.
"What are the statistics for long-term survival with these results?"
William asked, needing to understand the bigger picture of Catherine's prognosis. "With complete remission at this stage, Catherine's 5-year survival rate is over 90%, Dr. Martinez replied. The first 2 years will be the most critical for monitoring, but these results give us every reason to be optimistic about her long-term outlook." They scheduled Catherine's next appointment for October and received detailed instructions about warning signs to watch for between visits. As they prepared to leave the office, Dr. Martinez shook both of their hands and congratulated them on getting through such a challenging treatment period successfully.
walking out of the medical center felt surreal.
William found himself looking around at the ordinary world continuing its normal pace, people hurrying to appointments, traffic moving through intersections, clouds drifting across the sky, and marveling at how different everything seemed now that they had received good news. The weight of fear and uncertainty that had pressed down on them for months had lifted, leaving them almost dizzy with relief. In the car, Catherine called her sister Emma immediately to share the news. William listened as Catherine's voice broke with emotion while delivering the update that Emma had been anxiously waiting for. Through the phone, he could hear Emma crying and laughing at the same time, expressing the joy and relief that their entire extended family had been holding in. Their next call was to Catherine's parents, who had been steady sources of support throughout the treatment period. Catherine's mother cried so hard she had to hand the phone to Catherine's father, who managed to express his gratitude and happiness before becoming emotional himself. William realized that the fear and stress of Catherine's illness had affected many people beyond just the two of them, and sharing this good news felt like lifting a burden from everyone who loved Catherine.
That evening, they decided to celebrate quietly at home rather than going out to a restaurant.
Catherine was still building up her stamina, and they both wanted to process the day's news in private before sharing it with a wider circle of friends.
William cooked Catherine's favorite pasta dish, something she hadn't been able to tolerate during the worst days of chemotherapy side effects.
As they sat across from each other at their dining room table, William was struck by how normal the scene appeared. For months, their meals had been focused on Catherine's ability to keep food down and maintain nutrition during treatment. Tonight, she ate with genuine appetite and pleasure, savoring flavors that had been lost to nausea and mouth sores during chemotherapy.
"I feel like I don't know how to be happy about this yet," Catherine said as they finished dinner. "For so long, I've been focused on just getting through each day of treatment.
Now I'm supposed to celebrate and move forward, but I feel like I've forgotten how to think about the future."
William understood what she meant.
Their lives had been structured around medical appointments and treatment schedules for so long that the prospect of returning to normal life felt almost overwhelming. They had both become experts at managing crisis and uncertainty, but neither of them remembered how to make plans based on the assumption that Catherine would be healthy long-term. "Maybe we don't have to figure out how to be happy all at once," William suggested.
"We can just take it one day at a time, the same way we got through treatment."
Over the following weeks, Catherine's physical recovery continued to accelerate. Her energy levels improved dramatically, and she began to look forward to activities rather than just enduring them. The new hair growth was thick enough that she could go without head coverings most of the time, though she still preferred scarves when they went out in public.
William found the transition back to normal life more challenging than he had anticipated.
For months, his primary role had been as Catherine's caregiver and medical advocate. Now that Catherine was regaining her independence, he struggled to redefine his own identity and purpose.